RT334, Best Practices for Preventing Out-of-Sequence Construction Activities and Minimizing Their Impacts. RT334 conducted 2 studies on out-of-sequence construction activities, an expert-based study and a project-based study. The team will highlight the highest risk causes of out-of-sequence work, warning signs that can be used to anticipate out-of-sequence work, and impacts of out-of-sequence work on project performance. Based on their research findings, the team developed 21 practices that can prevent out-of-sequence work and minimize its negative impacts. Here to present their findings are Jim Rommel, Vice President Construction Operations, Wood Group; Chad Roesti, Construction Manager, Technip FMC; Dale Sullivan, Operations Manager, S&B Engineers and Constructors; David Tomac, Vice President, The Bolt Company; Michael Ibrahim, Graduate Research Assistant, University of Wisconsin; and the moderator for the panel, John M. Davis, Director of Project Excellence, Georgia Pacific.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Great. I know we're the holdup between you and the keynote speaker, so we'll try to get this through. So on the tables, you have a yellow sheet of paper. We know this is a lot of data to try to download in 40 minutes. So there's a QR code, a URL, and as well as the main concepts that we're going to talk about are on the back. So this team's been working for 2 years on out-of-sequence construction and best practices to prevent it, as well as how do you minimize their impacts. But before we dive into that, I want to take us on a little bit of a journey, a hypothetical journey. Take ourselves to a construction site. We're about 3 weeks out from an outage. You drive up to the site, you're a construction leader, and sitting on the construction trailer porch are 3 of your superintendents. And just by the look of them, you know something's not right. So you got Mike, the electrical superintendent, Tom, the millwright superintendent, and James, the piping superintendent. So as it is with the Sparkies, he jumps in first and says, my problem's the most important. And he starts in and says, the insulators didn't finish their work last night, and they still have scaffolding up in the way of my crews, and we cannot start the wiring as scheduled on the generator. This is going to impact the electrical tie that we were going to do during the outage. And worst of all, the insulators are only working nights, and we can't find the superintendent for the insulators to find out what his plan is. I'm going to have to get my people working on something else. So while contemplating the next move here, in jumps the millwright superintendent. He said, 2 of my crews didn't show up this morning. We were trying to do the final alignment on the compressor. We understand they went down the coast. There was a better job, $10 a day per diem, $1 an hour, and 9 months of promised work. So we need to get some more millwrights because we're already working 2 shifts, 7 days a week, and can't get it completed. Just when you think it can't get any worse, in jumps James. He said, well, all those things are great, but the main reason for the outage is the steam line tie-in. Well, he proceeds to talk about the crew was trying to complete the main steam line for the outage, and we found a piece of pipe was missing. We searched high and low for that piece of pipe, and it wasn't there. It wasn't on site. Come to find out, it was a late change from design, didn't get picked up by material procurement, and it wasn't on site. And we don't have any material or any size or anything that'll fit that piece. I wish I could say that was a hypothetical situation, but that was me. And I wish I could say it was just once. But I'm sure we've all had those out-of-sequence construction, and I could have really benefited at that time, not only earlier in the project for things to mitigate or minimize what was going to happen, but also how to deal with the situations that were coming up. In the end, like every project, we got it done. It's a few days late, some dollars more. We got it there. But there's a better way. And we're going to talk about in the presentation today how much that really costs us as an industry. And it's a staggering number that it costs us. So over the years, CII and other organizations have have researched many of the causes of poor construction productivity. Many are listed here, but there's been many research on poor productivity. The last piece that there was no documented research on is out-of-sequence work. That was the missing piece of the puzzle, and CII commissioned this team 2 years ago to take a look at the out-of-sequence work and what was the impact on productivity. Research team has been together over 2 years. There's been a wide range of expertise from both the contractor and owner side. We were originally led as a chair by Rick Bradford from Bechtel, who has since retired. A great group of owners, contractors, as well as our academics from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'll be your moderator today. I won't go through introductions since we already had that. Michael will be our main presenter today. And then we have the rest of our panel to give us that industry perspective: Dale Sullivan, Jim Ramel, David Tomac, and Chad Roesti. Dale, your thoughts?
Well, to kind of lead us into, kind of get us grounded on out-of-sequence, we've all probably been there. We've all had projects where we suffered out-of-sequence work. This project that the picture's on the screen up there for you to look at, this was a little bit unusual. This is one of our, the CII would like to say it, flash tracks. We actually started construction 2 months behind engineering's detailed design. So where the crane's sitting in that picture is actually a big, large compressor foundation that we actually planned to pour it in 2 steps because we took the initiative knowing it was going to be out of sequence because we had to set that exchanger that's sitting in that picture up on top of the rack. There was actually 2 of them. So we had to be up very close to the rack to be able to set it. Well, so we took the initiative to plan for it. We planned the compressor foundation in 2 steps, poured the major mat underground, decided to use part of that as the rigging pad for that large crane, which worked out very well. Everything was going kind of to our plan, even though it was a little bit out of sequence on what we would have liked to have done in a standard execution. But then the exchanger slipped another 3 weeks, which we're sitting there with the critical path sliding because they still didn't get there on time. So we all suffer it, and it's just this tool and the research that we've done, I think, will help your team be better prepared to manage and mitigate those issues.
Thanks, Dale. All right, process projects, chemical plants, refineries, offshore oil and gas platforms, they all involve complex systems. These complex systems are typically installed in a very congested work environment. Now imagine for a moment, you've just landed your dream job. You're the construction manager on one of these facilities. You're living the dream. It's fantastic. So you're out there and you come into the site one day and you find out, uh-oh, one of the pumps I need to set today, it's going to be delivered late. Well, bad goes to worse. Also, one of the vessels, that's going to be a month late. How can it get any worse? Oh, that stick of pipe, it got redesigned. So you're going to have to stuff that in that pipe rack, and guess what? It's on the bottom level of that pipe rack. Oh, what a headache. What a headache. Now, I know in this room you've got plenty of brain power, and for lack of a better word, plenty of gumption. You're going to figure out how to do this. But just think, to eliminate those headaches, if you had a tool that could help prevent out-of-sequence construction, how that would help you. David, why don't you share some of your building experience?
Thanks, Jim. What we're looking at here is a 4-sided structural glazing system. It's a complex system on a healthcare facility. And the thing protruding from that is a design element that is put there to break up this 300-foot expansive span of glass. It's just a fin. So this dichroic fin, or 2-color fin, is an absolute necessary part of the project. The team, as they were working through the enclosure system, put it kind of on the back burner because it's only 1% of the enclosure work. What you don't see on this photo is that on the back side of that complex system There's flooring going in, there's paint going in, except for every room on the back side of the fin. In those rooms, there's nothing happening. Because of the way the fin needs to be installed and ultimately inspected, it threw the interior work on the project completely out of sequence. The next two pictures that you're seeing here are pretty common in the healthcare industry. Paint is being applied in hallways, flooring is being installed, and yet there's design changes in some of the most complex areas of the hospital. Just another day in out-of-sequence HE double hockey stick.
Well, guys, move down a little bit in scale here. So what you're seeing here is a picture of the contractors pretty well along in their project here, and their drainage isn't even in place. Not in that drainage setup will lead to safety issues, flooding, equipment movement issues, not even counting issues dealing with safety mitigation, just dealing with the muddy conditions certainly add many man-hours this project. Now, second picture here that Mike's putting up, there's some temporary supports there. Look unsafe, not only contractors taking damage to the equipment and personnel and not having foundations in place prior to setting will certainly cause additional safety issues, additional man-hours to be spent to remove and reinstall the temporary supports while permanent foundations are poured. Our out-of-sequence tools can certainly help mitigate these types of issues.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what's common between all these stories and all these pictures is the occurrence of out-of-sequence work and the negative impacts it had on project performance. And I'm sure that all of us here in this room have their own stories and experience of out-of-sequence. Am I right? But, as Joan noted, out-of-sequence work has been a consistent missing piece in the literature. So the first thing that we did as a research team is define it once and for all. And we defined it as an activity or series of activities that are not performed according to a planned, logical, productive sequence. And according to this definition, out-of-sequence work is a really big industry challenge. And these three numbers signify how serious of a challenge out-of-sequence can be on our industry. Can any of you guess what these numbers stand for in the context of out-of-sequence work? Well, maybe over here? Come on. I'll give you a hint. The three numbers are percentages. Nobody? Well, our research has shown that on average, 15% of project activities are performed as pure out-of-sequence. And this results in 33% increase in construction schedule, as well as 25% increase in construction cost. And these are huge percentages. And to put it in perspective with the massive size of our industry, we can say that we're talking about $290 billion spent every year as a result of out-of-sequence work. And as much as this can be viewed as an enormous problem, we invite you through today's presentation to perceive the opportunity of saving this much money and this much time by using the research findings. However, out-of-sequence can have another possible impact, which is even more important than cost and schedule, which is safety, as Dale will illustrate.
Yeah, you know, we look at out-of-sequence work, and when we did the research, we really didn't see a big correlation between out-of-sequence work and safety performance on the projects that we surveyed and the people that we talked to. But the thing is it's like we talked about leading off this conference, yesterday, is the safety performance of CII contractors have come down, and we've got to look for that last little bit to get to zero. And one of the big things that we've been looking at in the industry lately is having low-frequency, high-impact incidents on our projects. Well, as one of those that we have suffered this year within our company was a direct result of out-of-sequence work. We was actually performing a piping job in the rack that should have been done on the ground. The piping was a 24-inch large line, had cold shoes on it, so it had to have these micarta insulation blocks between the steel and the shoe. Well, they could have been installed, bolted on the ground before this pipe was actually put up. Well, they weren't there, so we had to do it out of sequence after the pipe was installed, because it was several months after that pipe was installed that they came in. Picked the pipe up, overloaded a chain fall. The chain fall actually, the gear broke in it and dropped that pipe on an employee, a team member's foot, and took off 3 toes. Now, had we had that material on site at the right time, the odds of that happening, that low frequency incident happening, would have probably never occurred. So it does have a direct result, even though it may not have showed up in the research.
So from the start, we knew that we were talking about a serious problem. And our learning objective throughout the 2 years, and the learning objective of this presentation as well, was to identify the best practices to prevent out-of-sequence construction activities and minimize their impacts. And we tried to keep our research efforts in sequence for that matter. So we first investigated the causes, the main causes and root causes of out-of-sequence work. And then we researched the warning signs that can be used to anticipate that out-of-sequence is right around the corner and about to happen in the field. And this can give us the opportunity to take some preemptive actions to prevent out-of-sequence work from occurring at all. And then we moved and focused on the significant impacts of out-of-sequence work to leverage our efforts in identifying the correct reactive actions that should be taken to minimize the impacts of out-of-sequence work that already occurred. So overall, we researched the causes, the signs, the impacts, and the actions regarding out-of-sequence work. And we researched these 4 aspects first in the literature review, but there wasn't much there. So we turned into our industry members here and acquired practical knowledge about out-of-sequence work. Using this knowledge, we performed 2 studies, an expert-based study and a project-based study. And then using the findings of both studies, we compiled what we call a concept file, which is a manual of how to minimize out-of-sequence work in construction projects. But since this is a pretty comprehensive file, about 100 pages, we designed an interactive tool that can be used in order to minimize out-of-sequence work for your specific project. So throughout today's presentation, I'll walk you through the data that we used in the research, and then we'll talk about those 4 aspects of out-of-sequence work. Starting with the research data, as I mentioned, the first study that we performed is the expert-based study. In this study, the participant, we asked them to refer to their overall experience while answering some questions about out-of-sequence work, its causes, warning signs, and impacts. We had 88 experts participating in the study with average experience a little bit more than 25 years. So collectively, we're talking about more than 2,200 years. From these 88 experts, we had 38 from the contractor side and 43 from the owner side, and the balance came from consultants. From a geographical perspective, we had about 80% of our experts were located in the US, in the states highlighted here in the slide, and from other overseas as well. And we used in the study the CII IPRA standard scale in order to be consistent with CII past research. And we asked the experts to rate the likelihood of occurrence and the relative impact of out-of-sequence and its causes using this scale to minimize subjectivity and maximize objectivity as much as possible. So to give you a feel about this study, we asked the experts to rate the frequency they encounter out-of-sequence work in their projects and the negative impacts it causes on their project performance. And for both questions, they responded in the high. Also, we dig deep a bit and asked the experts to rate how different project types experience out-of-sequence maybe differently. And we found out that all project types are prone to out-of-sequence, as you can see from the numbers. However, 2 types stand out, which are the renovation, revamp, and industrial, as Chad will illustrate.
And Mike, it's clear to see that the data from the renovation industrial projects experience the highest frequency and also the highest impact as a result of the out-of-sequence work. Now, though you have that bolded up and red up there, you don't want to forget about the infrastructure and building. That data shows that the building infrastructure projects rank very high as well, and that out-of-sequence is a major problem in all project types.
Thank you, Chad. In addition to the expert-based study, we performed the project-based study. And this time, we had input about project data, mostly quantitative. Overall, we tracked and studied 42 projects. And these two projects, 80% of which were located in the US, and the rest came from Canada, Colombia, and Ireland. And we made sure that these projects cover all the major project types, as well as project natures. We made sure that we cover all the major project delivery systems in terms of design, bid, build, construction management agent, construction management at risk, design, build, and integrated project delivery. Last but not least, we were fortunate enough to have fast track as well as traditional construction projects. And to give you a feel about this study, we tracked for each one of these projects the percentage of cost spent to perform out-of-sequence work. And we found out that almost 1 in every 4 projects, or maybe a little bit more even, spent more than a quarter of their budget on out-of-sequence work. And this was remarkable for us. But then we tracked the percentage of hours spent to perform out-of-sequence. And again, we found out that 29% of the projects that we studied reported that they spent more than a quarter of their hours on out-of-sequence work. And we knew that we were talking about a really big problem, and we were very motivated to cure the industry from out-of-sequence work. And prevention is the best cure. So to prevent it from happening, we studied the causes. So the first step we did is we identified 88 causes, 88 possible causes of out-of-sequence work. These causes span 11 categories, as shown in the slides. These categories can be project team, material management, change management, and more. And then we asked the experts from our expert-based study to rate the likelihood of occurrence and the relative impact of each of these 88 causes. Using this information, we calculated a risk index for each of the causes. And then we used some statistical methodologies in order to categorize these causes in different risk tiers, so that risk tier number 1 has the most risky causes of out-of-sequence work, followed by risk tier number 2, 3 until 6, as you can see in the figures here. And our data showed that the top 2 risk tiers consist of the 10 causes that we should pay attention the most. And Jim will illustrate more about that from the industry's perspective.
Thanks, Michael. So, of course, being a general contractor, you know what I'm going to complain about most. Late design. So it's a huge problem. Also, now let me switch hats. Also being a professional engineer, I realize that construction needs to tell us what sequence they want to build things, that whole path of construction. And once you tell us that sequence, don't change out the personnel and start telling us a different sequence. Let's stick with it. And also in support of my engineering brethren, we need data from the vendors so we can complete our design. I think what we can all agree on is each one of these items can lead to out-of-sequence construction activities.
Correct. And more than that, we had the opportunity from our experts that came from owner's background and contractor's background to perform a statistical study and reveal the differences between owners and contractors in perceiving out-of-sequence. And actually, the findings were remarkably interesting. We found out that there are significant differences in rating the likelihood of occurrence of 2 factors. As you can see, failure to identify schedule requirements for pre-commissioning and inadequate quality trending. And can you guess who rated more than who? Owners rated more than contractors in these 2. On the other hand, we found significant difference in rating the relative impact of 10 factors. For example, late owner approval of contract deliverables, expedited schedule to meet owner's requirement, late approval of submittals. And can you guess who rated more than who this time? Contractors rated more than owners. And luckily on our panel, we have an owner and a contractor to make sense of these findings.
Michael, I think it's important to think about the likelihood of occurrence from an owner perspective. Owners are more likely to be involved in the commissioning, startup, and then, of course, the life cycle long-term operation. And if you look at those 2 items, those really play into the things that impact owners the most, that are into that commissioning and startup, which is failure to identify the schedule items for pre-commissioning and commissioning, as well as the quality items that weren't identified, improper trending was done, and they're not found until you're actually into commissioning or startup.
Okay, I'm going to lighten things up a little bit. John, you're the client, and what do we all know? The client is always right. But let's take a look at some of the things that really cause some of these problems as we're moving along. First is promised design delivery dates, missed them. How about some of the equipment that was supposed to be delivered? Late. So what does that cause? Causes a lot of rework, poor productivity. And then towards the end of the project, a whole bunch of specialty contractors started showing up and really created some stacking of trades and some more inefficiency and workarounds to do with that. So we each have different issues going into this.
It's true, there are some differences in perspectives. However, some of the factors everyone agrees upon. And our project-based study revealed that from these factors came team-related causes. Everyone agreed that the projects that had high out-of-sequence also had low coordination between project parties. And when we dig deeper into that, we found out that in these projects, the owner didn't participate much during construction. And also, there was a lack of engineering support during construction, as well as lack of construction involvement during design. And in some extreme and severe cases, the project team was inexperienced about the project type and the project size that was performed. From another perspective, from the planning perspective, we found out that the projects that had a lot of out-of-sequence also, in general, had low performance of the planning process. And again, when we dig deeper into that, we found that these projects had unsophisticated schedule modeling, and they didn't update the schedule as frequently as required. And in some severe cases, there was no baseline schedule whatsoever before mobilization. And to make sense more about these findings, we have Dale here.
Yeah, you know, Michael, it's like we talked about a lot during our research is whenever you have a well-thought plan, if you know that you're dealing with out-of-sequence work and you plan it, then it becomes a planned activity. You plan your way around it. You mitigate it up front. Your team's prepared for it. And when you have that well-thought plan and you have that schedule well-developed and you go into that project with that understanding, then your team is set up for a successful execution. It's whenever those things come in and interject into that plan that you didn't consider or you wasn't prepared for, that then you're trying to mitigate them on the run. You're trying to defend against those barriers and hurdles you got to get over. And at the end of the day, you know, if you have the plan and you work that plan, you got a high degree of chance of being successful. That's what we really like about this tool. You know, looking at this tool, it's not a fix-all, but it's something there that the team can take and actually go through a sequence of evaluating where they're at, what they're dealing with, and develop a plan to where it's setting them up for success. In today's market with the fast-track jobs, the last research team I was on was flash-track jobs, faster than fast-track. You're going to have things that you're going to have to deal with out of sequence. So if you deal with them and you plan for them, then you have a high degree chance of being successful.
Yes.
Michael?
In addition to those planning-related causes, there were some project-related causes, attributes of the project, that the data showed. From the project-based study, we found out that there is a high correlation between out-of-sequence work and project percent change. Also, and interestingly, we found that the projects that suffered from out-of-sequence the most were usually done using less collaborative project delivery system, especially design bid build. And the projects that succeeded in minimizing out-of-sequence work were done using more collaborative project delivery system, especially integrated project delivery. Even more interestingly, we found that project complexity level was not correlated with out-of-sequence, which means that all projects with different complexity levels are all prone to out-of-sequence work. And we should not underestimate this risk in any project. So the way I see it, knowing the cause gives us a step ahead in preventing out-of-sequence from happening. However, if we missed these causes, then we have a second chance. If we notice the warning signs of out-of-sequence work, we can still have enough time, enough money, enough effort to do something to prevent out-of-sequence from happening. And so we identified 56 warning signs of out-of-sequence work spanning the same 11 categories. And again, we asked our experts from the expert-based study to rate the accuracy and the correlation between each one of those warning signs in predicting out of sequence is about to happen in the field. And then we used some statistical methodologies in order to rank them from most accurate to least accurate. And our data shows that these are the top 10 warning signs, as illustrated by David.
Thanks, Michael. You know, I thought it was interesting. Yesterday we saw 3 research teams report out covering 6 items on here. You know, if you don't have a quality manager on your project, you're going to be managing quality issues, there's no doubt. John shared a very real story, and this is, especially in our competitive markets, we see this more and more. If you're making $1 more down the street, you're going to lose great workers. There's no doubt about it. The CCSU team reported on commissioning. If you're actually not talking about commissioning right at the beginning of your project, it's probably too late. These are the warning signs, a great part of the research and the tool that can help you prepare as you head into your construction journey.
But if you missed those warning signs also, we studied from the project-based study some execution-related factors, and we found that some of them are highly correlated with out-of-sequence work occurrence. The first one has a special relationship with out-of-sequence work, which is unplanned overtime. We found out that unplanned overtime and out-of-sequence work both cause each other. So out-of-sequence work happens, it causes unplanned overtime, which in turn causes out-of-sequence work, and then you get stuck in a loop of out-of-sequence work, which is really bad. Another thing we found out that long RFI processing time is always correlated with out-of-sequence work, as well as high frequency of using RFIs. And from the labor's perspective, we found out that trade stacking, absenteeism, and turnover are accurate warning signs in anticipating that out-of-sequence work is about to happen in this area. But if you missed the causes and the impacts, here comes the painful part, the negative impacts of out-of-sequence work. And we asked our experts again to rate the degree of which out-of-sequence results in schedule overrun, productivity loss, cost overrun, quality decline, and safety risks. And if we only focus on the experts that rated significant to extreme, we will still have more than 80% of the experts saying that out-of-sequence work causes schedule overrun in a significant to extreme way, and about 75% indicating that out-of-sequence work causes productivity loss and cost overrun in a significant to extreme way. From our project-based study, we had quantitative data. And so we tracked all these performance metrics, spanning 5 performance areas: cost, productivity, schedule, quality, and safety. And we used these equations that are shown in the slide to be consistent with past CII research. And then we performed robust statistical analysis to make sense of the relationship between these performance metrics and out-of-sequence work. And this is just an example to give you a feel of it. In this figure, the y-axis shows the productivity index in terms of earned over actual. And the x-axis shows the percentage of total hours spent performing out-of-sequence. And from the blue line, you can clearly see the strong inverse relationship between productivity and out-of-sequence, which means that as out-of-sequence increases, productivity decreases in a statistically significant way. And from the boxes here, you can also see that if you manage to control out-of-sequence work to be less than 5%, then you will end up with a productivity index in the range of 1, or maybe even a little bit more than 1. However, if out-of-sequence went out of control and you end up spending between 16 to 25% of your hours on out-of-sequence work, then you lose 25 to 30% of your productivity, which is remarkable. So we did such models for all these performance metrics, and we found out that out-of-sequence results in cost growth, lower productivity index, higher project hour factor, schedule growth, higher project schedule factor, as well as higher rework percentage, more drawing revisions, more NCRs, as well as more punch list items, all in a statistically significant way. From a quantification perspective, we found out that a 5% increase in out-of-sequence work can result in 8.5% drop in labor productivity. an 11% increase in construction schedule, 10% increase in construction cost, and 5% increase in work. And this slide is very important that Chad will make more sense of.
Now, Mike, wait a minute. This is the thing that we should get excited about. Now, let's discuss this slide in some more detail, and I don't think the audience understands just how important this data is into a contractor. A 5% increase in out-of-sequence work results in 8.5% drop in labor productivity. You had that slide up earlier. One of those three important numbers, remember, was that 15%. 15% on an average project is of all activities are performed as out-of-sequence. Average project, 15%. So multiply that 5% times 3, that's 15%. You got 8.5 productivity loss. You're looking on an average project, almost 25% productivity loss. Now, that's huge, man. By my experience, the average project overruns 25, 30% due to all communicating project causes. The results of the study shows that much of that cumulative cost can be contributed directly to out-of-sequence work. The opportunity here for the average project to potentially reduce productivity loss by 25% and reduce final cost by up to 30% makes this research of immense value to the construction community. Now, our tools are designed, we use early and often to help mitigate these risks and causes.
Thank you. So, moving to the actions that can be taken in order to minimize out-of-sequence work, again, we went to our experts from the expert-based study, and we asked them to recommend two types of actions: preventive actions to prevent out-of-sequence from happening, and then responsive actions. If out-of-sequence happens, what to do in order to minimize its negative impacts. And then we made sure that each of these actions were spanning the 11 categories of OIS causes as well as warning signs that we talked about previously in this presentation. And also these actions spanned 4 project phases: FEL2, FEL3, design and construction. And then we sat together as a team and made sense out of these actions. We validated them. And then we used our project-based study to validate them even more and make sure that they all work. Also, from the project-based study, we had the opportunity to investigate how some of the CII recommended practices can be used in order to mitigate out-of-sequence work. And actually, the results were good. We found that the projects that succeeded in minimizing out-of-sequence work successfully implemented front-end planning, successfully implemented alignment, constructability, planning for startup, and in some cases, some of the projects used 3D modeling as a way to mitigate and minimize out-of-sequence work, as well as a risk management process. But then we sat together with a team, and we made sense out of all our findings, and we aggregated 21 concepts that can be used in order to minimize out-of-sequence work. These 21 concepts are in the yellow sheet that is on your table. And then we spent so much effort in order to detail each one of these concepts in terms of the actions of this concept and when to apply each of the actions, the conditions for successful application, the cautions that we should take care about for each of the concepts, the targeted outcomes, and the illustrative examples from real projects of how these concepts can be beneficial in minimizing out-of-sequence work. Overall, we had 164 actions spanning the 4 project phases, FEL2, FEL3, design and construction. And then we compiled all these actions in a document that we call a concept file that can be used as a manual to minimize out-of-sequence work. But since this document is a 100-page document, and I know we all like reading so much, we designed an interactive tool that is very user-friendly, even in opening it. It is just an Excel file. Once you open the Excel file, you'll see this. You click Enable Content here, and then you have the tool 100% functional. When you click Start, it will take you to a dashboard. This dashboard shows that the tool consists of 2 modules. The first module, named Summary Reports. This is a static module. This reports the findings in a cool way that we'll discuss later on. However, the really good part of the tool is the mitigation tool. You should use this if you want to decrease out-of-sequence work for your specific project. If you have a project in mind that you want to decrease out-of-sequence for, you should be using module 2. However, if you're a first-time user, just click on the Help button, and then you'll have 20 pages explaining how to use this tool to the maximum value. So let's show you what Module 1 is. Module 1 reports some statistics and some findings, and then it takes you to the detailed report section. But instead of giving you like a 500-page report, it divided the findings into the interesting parts of it. So if you're interested in knowing more about the causes of out-of-sequence work, you can choose from this window either cause of out-of-sequence ranked by likelihood of occurrence, or ranked by relative impact, ranked by risk index. And you can do the same for the warning signs and for the impacts, and also for the statistical correlations. So instead of having a 500-page report, you end up with having like a 15-page report. And if you're interested in knowing more about the concept file, you just click Export Report, and then you have the concept file. Otherwise, if you want to decrease out-of-sequence work for a specific project, you should use Module 2. And then Module 2 will ask you about the project phase that you're currently at. And you can choose again between FEL2, FEL3, detailed design, and construction. And then the tool will take you through all the causes of out-of-sequence work so that you can select which ones of them are relevant to your project. And if you want to know more about any of the causes, you just click on it. And the one-page PDF will be saved to your computer to give you more information about this cause. Otherwise, you just tick what is relevant to your project. And if you're done selecting, let's imagine that you missed the top 10 causes of out-of-sequence here. The tool will just remind you, hey, by the way, our research has shown that these causes are the top 10 causes of out-of-sequence work, and they are very frequent. Are you sure they are not relevant to your project? After the user makes his mind or her mind, he can or she can follow to the next section of the tool, in which the user should input the likelihood of occurrence of each of the causes relevant to the project again. And then, using this information, the tool can compute an out-of-sequence score, or an OS score, which is shown in the dashboard here as the bold line. And it will compare the performance of this project to the industry average given similar situations. So in this case, the project was not doing well. First of all, it's in the orange zone, and it's performing less than the industry average. And you can know more about this if you click View Detailed Results. But the real beauty of this tool is done by collecting View or Save Best Practices, because this will tailor all the findings of the research and provide a manual that is specific for this project of how to minimize out-of-sequence work. Now, has the tool been used on real projects? I'll leave this to Jim to deliver the industry's perspective.
All right, thanks, Michael. So yes, we've tried it out on some pilot projects. What's really fantastic about this is, so the people that have used it, remember Module 1 is a lot of the reports. Well, 92% of those folks saw benefit in using this. 100% of the people saw benefit of using Module 2. Module 2 is that, so okay, we're kind of geeky and we like to get into Excel. We all saw benefits to that. So that's fantastic. The real indicator of this is everybody wants to use it on their next project. Each one of those test projects, those pilots, they want to use it again. That's a real selection process. Okay, this is good. Another thing to consider through all this, some people say, okay, but how long does it take me to get through this tool? It looks like a lot of little boxes I've got to check. Well, yes, it takes a little bit of time. It might take you, I don't know, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. Okay, so there's a couple of hours. Think about what Chad was talking about earlier. You could be losing 25% in your labor productivity, and this tool could help offset that. So it's probably worth spending a couple of hours up front and identifying these things. Now, I know you all just really want to get to the tool. So the QR code, you can download the tool. I think you also got some write-ups in there.
Yes, we have all the PDFs of the main research findings in the QR code in the yellow booklet, as well as the website that's written beneath it. And also, we have a station outside. We can show you more about the tool. Just to wrap up this presentation, this research, We've been talking about out-of-sequence work. We identified 88 causes of out-of-sequence work. We studied likelihood of occurrence, relative impact, and risk index. And we defined risk tiers for them. We identified 56 early warning signs. And we did some statistical correlation between out-of-sequence work and some of the project-based factors, as well as the significant impacts. And we talked about the OS rating score. And finally, we talked about the 21 concepts that can be used in order to minimize out-of-sequence work. And they are all compiled in the tool. So, ladies and gentlemen, right now you have the means to start saving these numbers, to start decreasing this 15% number, and to start saving up to $290 billion a year from the construction industry. Before I hand it out to John to moderate the Q&A part, I'd like to acknowledge that this work has been a result of a great team. We had an all-star team, and it's because of this team we are presenting this research. And quite honestly, because of this team and the good work that they produced, I was awarded yesterday. So I want to thank all of them. We have many of them here. We have PI Professor Adhana from University of Wisconsin-Madison, as well as Dr. Jeff Russell. And I know we have Mark, we have Hussein, we have Ibrahim, and we have many more. So thank you very much. And thank you all for listening to us. And now, I give it to the person who has all the answers to all the questions. Thank you.
I have the pointing finger. So, do we have any questions?
Good job, Michael.
Everybody wants a break?
Someone is moving over there.
All right.
So what team member would be best suited to do this and on a project team, and when? When in terms of phases of a project?
So this tool is meant to be used early and often. So as much as you can use it, as you get new team members, as you're moving to different phases, early and often is the emphasis of this tool.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the who is probably the whole team. It may make sense to get in a conference room and have the team, 5, 6, 7 of you together going through and having the conversation, the critical conversation that's necessary to understand where you're at and how you're going to get past the things in front of you.
A lot of these items would be put into your risk register as well. So you would be part of that team as well, could be part of this discussion, and all those mitigating factors that go with these risks will be implemented in our tool too. So.
Thank you.
Next.
When you looked at these events, did you consider them as independent, or did you look at the interdependencies between them, where one may cause another of those events to occur?
We looked at the interdependencies between them, and we looked how a network of events can cause others, and this can lead up to out-of-sequence work. For example, we looked at how out-of-sequence work causes overtime, and then overtime causes again out-of-sequence work. So we kept that in mind regarding all the findings, specifically in the project-based study.
And just to add to that just a minute is whenever you have an out-of-sequence event, typically it's something that's in a sequence already, so it's going to have an impact. There's an interdependence of that out-of-sequence. And like the RFI process, if you have a project where you're suffering 2 weeks of return on answers on RFIs, you may pull out of areas and back into areas waiting on answers and those types of things. So there's independence there of the out-of-sequence activities.
Jimmy Cravens, Pathfinder Company. You demonstrated statistics associated with various project types. Is it fair to say that those results are close enough that the application of the tool can be applied by all the folks here to all the types of projects without too much regard for what type of project they're dealing with? Is there anything unique that should be considered based on the types of projects and the business sectors?
Look, I don't think there's a project out there that couldn't benefit from this. We did span across all the sectors. We did see some results that were key towards some versus others, but certainly the project can be used, or the tool can be used on any project in any location.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sjoerd Hoekstra, SBM Offshore. The way I see it, the business will automatically compress the schedule to what it can afford and cause rework or cause out-of-sequence work. Did you guys look at, from a bigger picture, the cause either from a compressed schedule versus poor project performance or project execution?
Yes, so from the expert-based survey, actually compressing the schedule to satisfy owner's requirement was one of the top 10 causes of out-of-sequence work. However, from the project-based perspective as well, from the project-based study, we found out that if this doesn't happen, poor execution will also lead to out-of-sequence work. So you should work on preventing this and preventing that. It's not enough to say we will not compress schedule and then we execute poorly. Then we'll end up with out-of-sequence work.
The business will drive the compression of the schedule. There's not a choice there. What I really like is the fact that there's a mitigation component that allows for that compressed schedule.
I think
and it'll just make life more miserable. That's all.
I think that's the reality. Is this is part, this is intended to be part of a risk management process and identifying, getting these items on your risk register, communicating it, and what that mitigating strategy is. So when that owner, me, says go faster, you can at least communicate, we told you this is what it's going to do, and this is how we're going to respond, but there's still a risk.
And also regarding expediting the schedule, we found out, for example, that second shift caused less out-of-sequence than unplanned overtime. So there are some strategies to minimize out-of-sequence given that it will happen because of something that is not in our hands. And this is included also in the concept file.
One more over here.
Yes, great work, and I'm not saying that because I know 3 of the panelists, but because I really think it's really good work. Question, and you guys briefly addressed this, contracting strategies, right? How does contracting strategy inform or correlate with more out-of-sequence work or less?
Well, we found out that more collaborative project delivery systems and contracting strategies will allow the team to work together in mitigating out-of-sequence that will happen anyways. So for example, if a change happened, the team is collaborative enough to work out on solving this change and updating it into the schedule with minimizing out-of-sequence work. However, if the team is in silos and everyone is working on his or her own, then out-of-sequence will happen in a more severe way.
Yeah, and Victor, I think along those lines, so some of the things, if you work through some of the recommended practices in this tool, that helps. And also, let's look, we've talked through the conference, we've got a lot of best practices that CII has developed, and following those, that also helps mitigate some of that.
And just because you and I did serve on Research Team 311, which was flash tracking projects, we looked at contracting strategy, helps you have that IPD approach, the way you work issues up front and get the right people involved that you can manage and mitigate those issues even though you're going very fast and you know that they're going to be out of sequence. You have a plan to deal with them and your team's all pulling on the rope in the same direction.
One more over here, or here. We'll go to the middle.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I might have missed this. I'm Chris Carson, I'm with Arcadis, so I'm the National Director of Project Controls. We look at out-of-sequence work sometimes as an opportunity, because occasionally it means that their logic wasn't right, and so they've gotten to a certain point in completion of an activity, and then they really can move on to another activity, and where it should have been broken up into 2 to allow them to do part of the scope and then move on. Did you look at that at all as to the impact on maybe the accuracy of the logic that's causing some of the out-of-sequence work?
We had some of the concepts in order to improve the planning progress and the planning efforts in order to get the schedule as accurate as possible so that we baselined it and out-of-sequence is relative to it. However, in case there is an opportunity for that, we also have some practice in the concept side of how to make use of it. However, we focused more on the negative impacts of out-of-sequence work and how to minimize them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks for all the questions. I'm sure the music's going to start playing soon because they want these awardees to get off of the stage. So appreciate it. If there's any other questions, we'll be outside. We'll be able to demonstrate the tool or answer any questions that you have. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.